Brett, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. And welcome to Revisto's webinar on integrated project delivery. We have people joining from around the globe, so thank you for taking the time to attend. Hi, I'm Chris Mawson, the APAC Customer Success Director here at Revisto, based in the beautiful South Island of New Zealand. And unfortunately for you, I'll be your moderator of the panel today. So we have four great panelists today, and I will introduce them in a second. But just to give you an overview of today's webinar, we'll be bringing together leaders from industry and academia in New Zealand to explore what must change to make IPD 2.0 the industry standard. So we're going to draw on lessons from Lincoln University's award-winning Waimarie Science Hub, sorry for my pronunciation, where IPD 2.0 cut coordination conflicts by 80% and was delivered ahead of schedule and on budget. Today's panel will examine why the shift is needed now, what early adopters have learned, and what contractual, cultural, and leadership changes are required to support the wider adoption across New Zealand. So a quick look at the agenda for today, housekeeping followed by panel introductions, then parts 1 to 4, where we'll focus, or the panel will focus on IPD, talking about why now and drawing on real life examples before looking into the future, giving suggestions of where we need to head. So let's quickly have a look at through the housekeeping. This session is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent out following an email, plus all attendees will receive a IPD procurement checklist, which Sean from Verve Projects, one of our panelists, has so kindly shared and helped pull this together. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please use the Q&A panel to submit your questions to the panelists. This is an interactive session, so keep an eye out for the polls and please participate where you can. To stay up to date with any future webinars and events, follow us on Revizto on LinkedIn. So, the panelists. I'd like to welcome our panelists from across New Zealand. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing your precious time and knowledge. So, introductions left to right. Brad Sauer is the principal at Waimarie with 20 years in digital delivery across New Zealand, Australia, and abroad. He's led IPD and ECI approaches on major projects and brings a clear view of what needs to change to make collaboration standard practice. Professor Pamela Bell from Victoria University in Wellington works with industry and government on innovation in construction. She brings an education, research, and policy lens to the panel and can speak to what's working and what's blocking adoption. Sean Donohoe is the director at Verve Projects, who's delivered complex builds across the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. He spent his career advising teams on how to set jobs up for success, especially through smarter procurement, and has seen firsthand the upside when people collaborate early. Jason Howden is Revisto's Chief Innovation Officer and a long-time leader in digital construction, with 30 years working on major New Zealand, Australian, and UK projects. He's on the panel to share how digital tools can support a true virtual big room and keep IPD teams aligned. The last person who's not on the photograph isn't part of the panel, but very much part of the webinar is Danny from Revizto. So Danny has done a fantastic job pulling the panel together and the webinar together, and we'll be running the polls in the background. Without Danny, these won't happen. These webinars don't happen. So a big, huge thanks. So what is integrated project delivery? I guess, simply put, IPD is a way to run construction projects so teams work better together. In IPD, the owners, designers, and builders join early and stay involved through design and construction. It aims to save time, cut waste, improve quality, and avoid conflict. IPD depends on trust, clear communication, and a strong team culture. Modern tools like Revizto help this happen by keeping models, project data, and people connected in one open shared space. So, setting the scene, I love this quote, Grace Hopper, as you can see on screen here. Um, the most dangerous phrase in language is we've always done it this way. And it's a good reason why we're here today. So in July of this year, we brought together more than 60 senior leaders in Wellington for our IPD roundtable event. The point of that session was pretty simple. Get past the theory and talk about what's actually working, what's not, and what needs to change if IPD is going to be more than a one-off success story. That roundtable event wasn't a one-off event, and oops, move that. And we're already planning follow-ups in New Zealand. Part two session will be in April next year, and an Australia event in Q1 or Q2 next year. So today's event is very much part of a bigger continuing conversation that we're going to have. Danny has popped up a poll if you're interested in participating in any of the New Zealand or Australian events, please submit the poll. Okay, so building on the round table, we pulled the insights together and created a white paper, which our panelists today directly contributed to. If you want a copy of this, scan the QR code on screen and download it. Any feedback, please reach out to me or any of the team on LinkedIn. So this paper isn't meant to sit on a shelf. It's a call to action around what's holding IPD back in ANZ and what it will take to make it business as usual. Today's session is really the continuation of that work, and we're using this paper to go deeper and pull out practical takeaways you can apply on real projects. So, enough of me talking, time to get the panel involved. Welcome, Pamela, Brad, Sean, and Jason. How are you all today?
Very good.
Good.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Good, thanks.
Hopefully join the beautiful Kiwi summer that we're having so far. So I'd like to get started with a question for Brad. So the paper calls this moment a pivotal point for construction in New Zealand. Why do you think the time for IPD has finally arrived?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's a pivotal point because of all the pressures are now pointing in the same direction. On one hand, the economic reality is brutal. The cost of materials, compliance and labour has gone up. And in New Zealand, we're in an awkward spot. We were in the top bracket globally for how much we spend on infrastructure, but the bottom bracket for the value we get back. We're paying a premium for outcomes, and no one's happy, clients, contractors, or designers. At the same time, the industry players, contractors, and consultants are being squeezed. Many are being downsized, they're carrying more risk with thinner margins, and we're understandably less willing to take a punt on the unknowns, the traditional procurement, that traditional procurement pushes onto us. We overlay that with NZS 3910, which has never really been designed for genuine shared risk and reward or multi-party collaboration. You can hack it to get partway there, but you're always fighting the form of contract. And then sitting behind all of that, we've quietly built a digital maturity we used to say we didn't have. BIM is normal. Platforms like Revizto mean we can actually give everyone a single source of truth and see issues in days instead of months. So for me, IPD 2.0 isn't nice to have. Cost pressures, old contracts, and mature digital tools are colliding. We've basically run out of excuses not to collaborate deliberately, and IPD 2.0 is the framework that makes that collaboration real rather than aspiration.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Brad. So, Sean, based on your experience delivering projects outside of the IPD framework, what challenges or pain points have stood out most when you've been dealing with these projects?
When I reflect on projects delivered outside an IPD framework, the pain points are pretty clear and consistent. Firstly, poor coordination. Without collaboration and integrated design, we face endless variations, delays, and contractual battles. Energy is spent defending our positions rather than delivering outcomes. Secondly, poor construction planning and procurement. We give limited time to procurement and genuine construction planning. The promise team commits to what they can during that tender phase, and then the delivery team are left to try and pick up the pieces and scramble to put the project on track. That disconnect creates inefficiency and frustration from the outset on projects. Thirdly, the culture often slips into one-upmanship and contractual peacocking. Parties are more focused on protecting themselves, showcasing their strengths, and shifting blame rather than trying to solve problems together. It's a competitive environment, not a collaborative environment. The result, misalignment. We've got siloed decision-making, escalating costs, and friction that drain time and trust. These are why IPD is essential. If we keep going the way we are, we're just going to become even more divided as an industry.
Keep on doing what we're doing doesn't make it better, I guess. I get Pamela, a question to you from an education and research perspective. What trends are you seeing globally that align with IPD principles?
Yeah, look, there's a lot happening out in the research space, especially with the digital underpinning. But look, the first thing I'd say is construction is a people sport, right? It's a team sport, it's relational. What we're essentially talking about here is how do we create trust through the contracting mechanism by bringing everyone into the room to agree expectations as early as possible in the project. So it's a no-brainer, but it's really difficult to achieve because you have to convince the client to front load the cost, right? And you have to get the right blend and the right amount of design complete at the right time in order to get the right accuracy and input from your contractor. In terms of a research perspective, look, I think there's been so much change in the digital space and that we've had so many people kind of earn their pathway in the digital world that now we've got this interesting time, and I can say this from the point of view of Victoria University, where we're setting up a new construction program where we can create a learned pathway. So everyone who's done the hard yards, earning their digital and BIM stripes on the job, we've now got the benefit of learning from them, and we're able to create a really well staircased program for something like this kind of 3-year Bachelor of Construction that we're setting up at the moment. But look, I have to be honest, the real research and the real opportunity here is to create graduates and young human beings that understand the collaborative team sport of construction. So that's a really huge emphasis.
Yeah, I guess I've been in the industry for a long time, and it's that human aspect that people don't associate with building, but it's huge. It's building those relationships and that trust, which is massive. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see and hear what you're doing with the new generation which are coming through, because we have to change the way that we've done in the past. Just want to bring in Jason. I know you're back in Aotearoa, and you're not over the ditch anymore, but you have been there for a number of years. How does Australia compare in adopting collaborative delivery models? What can we learn from what's happening across the Tasman from your perspective?
Well, both New Zealand and Australia have a history of adopting innovative contractual models. And I think where some of these models like alliancing and ECI, while in their core might share similarities with IPD, where they differ from IPD is that holistic collaboration. And I think some of the things that we can learn from Australia is how do they approach the large scale and rapid implementation of many large scale projects whereas New Zealand has a smaller play or a smaller pool to play in. But conversely, Australia has a massive opportunity to leverage New Zealand's smaller pool and innovative speed to adopt new ways of working and that kind of 2 degrees of separation. Everybody knows everybody. And when you're playing in a human-led sport, to quote Pamela, it really does help when you have those relationships to bend or tweak contractual words to get the right outcome for the project and the ultimate stakeholder at the end of the day. And I think that's something that Australia can really leverage by seeing New Zealand as this incubator for innovation and then work out how they transport that across multiple states. And that'll be their big challenge, is how do they get 6 states aligned with a common way of thinking.
Mm. Yeah, and with all your travels, I know you do a lot of travel around the globe. You probably see this, have a better perspective than most of what's happening. And I know we've had discussions of how New Zealand punches above its weight in this department. A lot of the time, we think we're a small island at the bottom of the planet. But yeah, I think we had some interesting discussions on that and how, in certain ways, especially on the BIM side of things, that New Zealand is far ahead of some other countries.
A great point. New Zealand is well known. Our probably most known sports team, the All Blacks. I was in the UK recently. I didn't get to see them play Wales, but I did watch it, and it was great outcome for us. Touch and go there for a minute, but I think that just underpins our team of 5 million, what we can do when we get together and really put our thinking caps on. A great testament to the BIM heroes that have gone before is the New Zealand BIM Handbook. It stands head and shoulders above most in the world, and I don't think we give it credit for the depth of knowledge and IP that is nestled away in the New Zealand BIM Handbook and its associated appendices. It's world class, it's world leading, and we should lean into that and add to that a full IPD 2.0 lens and layer.
No mention about the England match there, Jason. But anyway, we'll move on. So time to look at the case study which Brad, Sean, and Jason worked on. So Lincoln University's Waimarie Science Hub is a great example of IPD working under real constraints. I can't believe these stats. Delivered ahead of schedule, on budget, with an 80% reduction in coordination conflicts. Only around 3 RFIs a week, which just goes to show that this is actually working, which is huge on a project of this size. So Sean was a project manager and Brad led the architectural team and managing the BIM platform inside of Revizto. So I'd like to go to Sean, and from a client perspective, how did early contractor involvement and co-location shape project outcomes, did you think?
Early contractor involvement and co-location were game changers for us. Instead of endless requests for information, we saw very low volume during construction. That meant that governance group could focus on big decisions, change management, strategic direction, rather than watching contingency slowly erode. By bringing contractors in early and working side by side, we achieved early alignment. We weren't firefighting on site, we were designing during design. Issues were resolved before they became problems, and collaboration was embedded in the process. From a client's perspective, this approach meant that we agreed the price up front, and we avoided a slow death of 1,000 cuts with RFIs through construction. That's the power of early involvement in co-location. Fewer RFIs, stronger alignment, and the outcomes shaped by collaboration rather than conflict.
Yeah, I still can't believe that 3 RFIs per week on average. That's crazy and such a complex, large project. So I guess from a design perspective, Brad, how did early contractor involvement and co-location shape project outcomes for you?
Yeah, it's not too different to what Sean just said, but it changed the job from day one. So instead of a traditional handoff where the contractor was met with a mostly finished design, Lees and the key trades were with us at the table while the major decisions were being made. That meant we were doing design during design, not redesign on site when something didn't fit. Co-location made that real. We had shared project room and a virtual big room in Revizto where everyone, the architect, engineers, contractors, trades, and client, could see the same federated model and the same issue list. There was nowhere for problems to hide, which sounds a bit scary, but was actually liberating for the team. In practical terms, that showed up with, as you've pointed out, Chris, fewer RFIs and coordination clashes. And the conflicts we did have were picked up in design coordination sessions rather than in live ceiling void with the program breathing down everyone's neck. The white paper talks about IPD 2.0 delivering around an 80% reduction in coordination conflicts on the project. That's what happens when you put the people who build the thing into the room while you're still deciding what that thing is. So the early contractor involvement set the intent, and co-location, physical and digital, made it the daily habit.
Yeah, I mean, I love that fact, the co-location of the teams. Having worked on these larger projects where you get all of the teams together, it's amazing what you can actually achieve when you're not siloed in different offices around. So it's, yeah, to do that is fantastic. I'll go back to Sean again from a client perspective. What were some of the key turning points or challenges where collaboration really paid off on the project?
For us, we started as we meant to go on. We started with respect and shared goals. We established a project charter, which I spoke about at the in-person event, and that was developed jointly between all parties. That charter set the framework for acceptable behaviour and reminded us that while each of us had a different role and driver, we all had one shared goal, which was to get Waimarie built. We didn't just sign contracts, we built relationships with each other. And that goes back to what Pamela spoke about before. We had coffee catch-up, we had beers after work, and we had open book processes created that helped us create informal bonds and made our collaboration real. Part of the charter was we empowered people to speak their minds respectfully. Issues were called out early and dealt with progressively rather than festering and undermining project culture. That openness was critical to sustaining trust over the life cycle of the project. And one of the key things was data transparency. As Brad mentioned, having that shared environment and by putting numbers on the table, conflict was reduced before it could take root. Everyone saw the same information, everyone understood the same risks, and that clarity built confidence. At the same time, we put good governance in place. Weekly and fortnightly team meetings kept everyone aligned, while monthly PCGs allowed for key decisions to be made. So when we talk about trust as the foundation of IPD, it wasn't abstract. It was lived every day through respect, share goals, governance, and the courage to be open.
Brilliant. And I guess, Brad, same question to you, but from design perspective, similar answer or?
Yeah, of course, because it was such a successful project, we're all aligned, right?
Yeah.
But one was when the cost and supply pressures really bit. So because this project was affected pretty heavily by COVID and built during that time, instead of that becoming a blame game, the architect drew it and the contractor priced it, we used the project charter and the shared risk lens to reframe it as, okay, so as a team, how do we keep the science brief whole and the budget intact? And we're able to sit down around the table with the services trades, the structures, the client with Revizto up on the screen and replan whole chunks of the building in a matter of days. Nobody loved the pressure, of course, but everybody was able to own the solution. Another turning point was around some of the more complex lab spaces. So traditionally, late user changes and specialist spaces create absolute chaos. Here, because we had transparent data and a shared model, we could show the implications of change in real time, spatially, in services and in program. That shifted the tone from argument to informed trade-offs. That then allowed Lees to have conversations with Sean and the client team, and everyone was informed about that process. Then there were the really human moments, which Sean's alluded to, the hard conversations when things did go wrong. The combination of the charter, the big room setup, and the visible data meant we could say, this is what we're seeing. This is how it impacts the project. How do we fix it together? That's where we saved days and dollars. We'd normally write off as an inevitable argument situation.
Yeah, it's interesting that the software angle, but also that it's hugely on the people that you're dealing with is huge. I always say you don't build buildings by computer softwares and things. It's the relationships that you have that help and drive that forward. I guess I'd like to come to Jason from a digital enablement side. How did Revizto act as the virtual big room with this project? I think Brad touched on it slightly in what he said.
Yeah, the Revisto's unique differentiator in the market is it's able to host not only agnostic model files from all sorts of authoring tools, but more importantly, that 2D contractual drawing set that is the basis of what gets built. And by combining that together in the virtual big room, all stakeholders can come together, see all the information the same way. And that's an important step. When you're collaborating across silos, everybody's got their own source of truth. But with Revizto, you have one source of truth. And that way you can rely on the information that you're looking at, have the stakeholder conversations about critical milestones, critical paths, and be confident that you're seeing it the same way. And then by tapping into the data behind the model, that opens up visibility to things that might be lost in specifications, again, squirreled away in emails or CDEs. And I think this is part of that kind of step change with IPD 2.0 is creating that virtual big room where people come together around their project data sets to develop and build the project in synergy with each other.
Awesome. I guess going back to Sean, the white paper highlights trust, and I know you talked about it earlier. Trust is a foundation of IPD. How was that built and maintained across such a large team and large project?
I can't really add much to what I've said before, but I think a lot of it came down to showing people the respect to hear them out. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, and often when somebody that doesn't normally speak up is given that respect to be listened to, that helps to build trust among the team. Often in large projects, there's a few key characters that get around, which probably Brad and I were two off, along with some of the members of the contractors team. Listening and respecting other people in that process is essential to make sure that the whole team feels respected rather than just a few people who are sitting at the top of the table. And as I mentioned before, that charter set out jointly how we were going to try and achieve that.
Yeah, and I guess Brad, similar from you, the charter and the engagement and the respect, I guess for everybody in the team from the design side would be super important as well.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about trust today, and we often do on projects. But I think the key on Waimarie was it wasn't a poster that we just pinned on the wall and kind of occasionally walked past. It was a set of deliberate choices that everyone bought into and everyone was part of. And first of all, we invested up front. Before we worried about program charts, we built a project charter together, client, architect, contractor, and trades. That charter captured behaviours as clearly as it captured scope, how we'd handle issues, how we'd communicate, and how we'd treat each other when things did go sideways, as they always do. It sounds simple, but it did give us something to point back to when pressure came on, and it always does. Second, we made time for the relationships, as Sean's alluded to. Some of the best IPD advice in the white paper is have a beer or a coffee catch up and get to know each other socially, because that's what you can fall back on in hard times. Third, we use digital tools to keep us honest. Revizto gave us a single view of the truth, every clash, every issue, every decision, and predictions of work completion, and everyone could see it. You can't quietly bury a problem when it's on a dashboard in front of the whole team, brought up on a daily basis. That transparency is uncomfortable at first, but it's exactly how you build trust. You show you're working. And finally, there was a conscious leave your ego at the door mindset. When people saw leaders from all organizations owning their mistakes, asking for help, and sticking to that open book approach, it gave everyone else permission to do the same. So trust wasn't just a one-off achievement. It was a behavior that was re-earned every single week and every meeting.
Fantastic. Seems so simple. And when we put it like this, of why aren't we doing it on every single project? And I guess that's the discussion that we're having today. So we'll move on to nice segue, overcoming the barriers. So great quote from Brad here, why ECI is so important with projects. We also had a great engagement at the roundtable attendees on this subject. The white paper highlights three big blockers which seem to come up at each of the tables and the discussions. Contracts, number one, culture, and capability. So before we unpack that, Danny's going to run a quick poll. Pick the one that feels most real for you right now, and we'll come back with the results a little bit later. So I'm just going to click on that. So I'd like to ask Pamela a question. What's holding IPD back from wider adoption in New Zealand from your perspective?
Yeah, great. Look, there's a few things we're hearing here, isn't there? But I love that there's this constant theme around trust, which comes back to essentially the generosity of sharing the learning around case studies. Look, the more that we share what works and what doesn't, the more it raises the game for everybody. And I think a conversation I had this morning with a contractor, we talked about in prototyping, it's the third or fourth time you prototype something where you start to get the results, right? So he talked about the third or fourth time they did early engagement as a contractor with a design team on different projects. And he said the mistakes they made in the first couple of times were holding back and being a little bit too polite through the early engagement process. So the message I took away from this is that you have to strike the right balance of particularly contractors putting forward ideas and particularly designers listening to those. And I say that as someone who's trained through architecture, not to downgrade any of the players, but it works both ways, doesn't it? We all have to be brave and bring our ideas to the party, and we all have to use our taringa, use our ears for listening. So both of those things do not come easily to us. So there's a good amount of personal stretch there. Look, I'm aware also there are contractual aspects. NZS 3910, when we did the revisit a couple of years ago, didn't get the full IPD treatment. So there's an opportunity for some standard clauses. And I would say that onus is on industry, or for industry to work with research. Here at Victoria, we've got a Master of Construction Law. So there's lots of great research opportunities to kind of get some standard clauses out there. So those would be my two things, Chris.
Yeah, it's interesting, the 3910 contract side of things seems to be a common theme throughout the IPD roundtable event. Sean, I'd like to bring you in. How can clients and contractors reframe risk sharing so smaller firms aren't excluded from large retentions?
I think if we want to bring smaller firms to the fore in the industry, we need to rethink how risk is shared. Success lies in right-sizing risk, adopting progressive procurement models, building trust-based contingencies that don't lock out capable partners. Let's be honest, the people who set retentions aren't often involved in construction projects and don't understand the building blocks of projects. Won't name that particular section of the industry. Yet most projects only experience a single issue. It's not a multitude of issues. So why don't we consider a standard formula for retentions, say a percentage based on the most expensive package of work, rather than blanket retentions that punish everyone equally. These high retentions are often justified by a fear of catastrophic outcomes, which statistically sit at about 1% of all projects. It's not every single project that has catastrophic issues. We can't design our entire system around rare events. Instead, we should focus on contractor capability. Cheap is rarely cost effective, and strong pre-qualification standards can ensure the firms entering the market are competent and reliable. Retentions have to be seen in the broader context of risk management, alongside insurances, materials held off-site, and other safeguards. When we balance these factors intelligently, we create a fairer system that protects clients without excluding smaller firms. That's how we build an industry where collaboration and trust drive success, not fear and overcaution.
Interesting. That's a conversation we need to continue over a drink sometime, I think. Brad, I'd like to bring you. How can leadership and team culture enable transparency and collaboration, even if the contracts are lagging behind? How do we get that working now?
So I think the first thing we can do is accept that the cultural shift needs to happen before the contracts do. On Waimarie and in other projects, we've learned that leadership can choose to behave in an IPD way, even inside a very traditional form. That starts with being explicit about how we want to work, using a project charter, setting shared goals, agreeing how we'll deal with risk and change, and then acting consistently with that, regardless of what contract clauses say. Culture is also about who we put in the room. If we pick leaders who are defensive and transactional, that's the tone that will play across the project. If we pick people who are curious, who share information generously, and who are comfortable saying, I don't know, let's work it out together, that will set the correct tone for a project. Digital tools help as well. When we use a platform like Revizto as the common space for models, issues, and decisions, transparency stops being a slogan and becomes the daily reality. You can see who's engaging, which disciplines are leaning in, and where the bottlenecks are. So even when the contract is a bit behind the times, leadership can still model the behaviors of IPD 2.0. Leave ego at the door, share information by default, call out good collaboration when you see it, and use digital visibility to reinforce that we're all working on one project, not 10 separate scopes that are stitched together.
Fantastic. Which kind of leads nicely in a question for Jason that I've got. So, excuse me, Brad touched on technology and the role of that. What do you think the role does technology play in breaking down these silos, and what are the limits, if there are any limits? I know we're talking a lot about artificial intelligence and how that's changing the industry. What are your thoughts on that?
What a fantastic time we live in, the age of technology with the emergence of AI. All things abound. And I think this is one of these key moments in time when choosing the right technology stack is important for project delivery. And technology by itself doesn't create trust, but it can foster collaboration, which builds trust. And I think if we think about it in that order, your technology stack, it can either enable the breaking down of silos or reinforce the silos. And I think that's one of the things that is often overlooked when people set their digital strategies and their BIM execution plans for the delivery of projects. Do they want to foster collaboration, or do they want to encourage a more traditional siloed approach? And I think that's one of those key critical things that we can get better at doing, and leaning into some of the knowledge that's been shared over the last decade, particularly here in New Zealand, like the New Zealand BIM Handbook, which gives good guidance on how to foster and grow from a tech-led project delivery perspective, where the right outcomes are first or put front and center around creating that collaboration, trust, and human relationship that's built on top of good technological implementation.
Yeah, that's we are living in an interesting time, exciting time as well. I guess, Pamela, how do we bring all that together? So how do we balance innovation with Sean's procurement, with compliance and policy restrictions as a whole? How do we bring that all together? What's your views?
Look, I think we've covered most of the options or the answers, if you like, and I see them on a scale from the leadership through to the team players, and with a balance of the technical information and the human information, right? So at the leadership end is, well, essentially the procurement or the client leadership. And I think it's really important in an innovation lens to know when you don't have the answers, to know where to go to for the people who have already done the prototyping, like this case study, you know, whoever's done it 3 or 4 times, and find their learnings. For example, in the Crown agency space, we have Crown Infrastructure Delivery, CID, who hold that kind of body of knowledge. So it's finding that centre of excellence, finding that body of knowledge from a procurement perspective and tapping into it. From an all team players space, it's having the technical information that you need. We're talking about the digital tools, and then having the human behaviour around that trust, being able to step forward into those more difficult conversations, particularly upfront, in order to lay the risk capabilities and the contractual conditions so that then you can have the conversations later on as you've built up that human relationship and trust. And I guess in terms of the more tricky things, we mentioned conditions of contract, there's an opportunity for industry to step into that space and work with research and come up with some options and put them forward. So I think this kind of mechanism of having case studies and putting them forward on a webinar, having a conversation, is just the start of let's dig into the research questions to solve, and let's join up with the right parties and get some stuff done.
Sounds like a question for our New Zealand IPD 2.0 in April next year. So, okay, thanks, team. So let's finish by looking forward. So we've looked at the back and what we're not doing so well, but by looking forward, if IPD is going to scale, it needs to move from a special project like Lincoln University to normal practice. So, Pamela, how should universities, this is on you, and industry bodies be embedding IPD principles into education and training to bring the next generation through?
Yeah, awesome. And I must say, I'm stoked to be looking at a picture of a university with that beautiful cross-laminated timber staircase. And right behind me, I'm in Ngā Mokopuna, the Victoria University building with the cross-laminated timber staircase behind me. Honestly, I'm such a fan of the air stair. Look, I think uni is a space to grow amazing young industry entrants. So again, that's in that technical and human fundamentals perspective. We're trying to grow young, curious, critical, communicative people who can talk in the industry. And that's where the industry association comes in, right? That's the place to grow your network, to grow your social capital. So I can speak both from that university and industry body point of view, given I recently was running the Building Institute Aotearoa. So look, I think it's the human aspect and the human and machine teaming, or human and machine teamwork, which is the bit that universities really need to focus on. And that's the bit that industry, as a kaitiaki or guardian as well, is in help growing our young people to become good industry and team players. So it's really critical those first few years as grads get embedded in industry, that we show them how well we behave and how we are a good place to grow a career, with all your wonderful digital literacy and the things that young people can bring and teach up. That's the other aspect we're focused on in growing this new Bachelor of Construction and Master of Construction. We're very much focused on what are the future focused tools that young people can bring out to industry and train upwards, especially around file structures and just getting all your basics right in your data environment. Yeah, so lots of great opportunities.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think personally, I think the industry is quite ageist. So you get these young people coming into the industry, and it's like, oh, well, maybe I've been doing it for so long, you've just come out of university. So I think there's barriers there that we need to break down. And I think respect, which is across all of the conversations that we have today, is massive in the industry, that we need to promote. So thanks for that. Sean and Brad, a question to you guys. What does success look like when IPD becomes business as usual? So 2026, 27, who knows? What's your thoughts on that?
I'll go first, Brad. Firstly, for me, it looks like standardized contracts across the industry. As we mentioned, we've got a couple of standard forms we use in New Zealand, but on every single project, special conditions are different. Instead of reinventing the wheel on every project, if we have consistent frameworks that reduce disputes, build trust, and make collaboration the default rather than the exception. Secondly, success means digital workflows. Our projects run on integrated platforms where data flows seamlessly, decisions are made in real time, and duplications eliminated. Technology becomes the backbone of collaboration, not an afterthought. And third, and most importantly, success is a cultural shift. Collaboration is no longer something we negotiate project by project. It becomes an industry-wide norm. Architects, engineers, contractors, and clients operate as one team, united by shared goals and accountability. And ultimately, success is measured by not just projects completed, but the outcomes we deliver. Better value, greater sustainability, and innovation that sets New Zealand apart on the global stage.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sean. Brad?
Yeah, I think for me, success is when IPD 2.0 stops being a special topic for webinars and just starts being how we deliver. In terms of contracts, it's exactly what Sean said. There's no point me repeating it. Culturally, it's when clients and contractors expect to be in the room at the concept stage, with key trades and specialists involved early. And no one blinks when you say we're doing a joint charter or we'll co-locate the team. It becomes normal, and it's not a radical thing we need to talk about. Digitally, success is when every significant project runs on a common data environment and a shared coordination hub as standard, where everyone can see the model, understand the issues, and contribute to solving them in real time. Less RFIs, less rework, fewer nasty surprises on site, not as anecdotes, but as measured outcomes. And then at an industry level, a lot of what Pamela's been saying, success is when collaboration is built into our education, our professional bodies, and our procurement policies. So IPD style thinking shows up in how people are trained and how projects are bought, not just in a few standout case studies. So IPD as business as usual looks like fewer claims, more conversations, fewer silos, and more shared wins.
Seems so easy. Like, why aren't we doing it? And I know it's a deeper question than that, and there's a lot of moving parts, but the one takeaway from the round table event that we had was just like everybody wants this, everybody wants to push it forward. So it'd be interesting to see where we can get in the next few years. I mean, Jason, from a technology point of view, what's Revisto's vision for enabling IPD2 at scale?
Our vision is to act as a catalyst, not to just build great technology that's easy to use, but to work with industry and our partners and to build a shared ecosystem where knowledge and technology come together, and we can be a facilitator in putting that knowledge and I guess thought leadership out into industry to help move the conversation forward. I think industry needs these conversations where they can learn by example and see the lighthouse, and Revizto serves a critical key in that kind of ecosystem where we're connected with multiple projects, whether it's a single small-scale project or a very large multinational giga-scale project. We have a unique position on the global stage to share and I guess project some of these insights around the world and bring what's offshore to New Zealand, but more importantly, take the innovation from New Zealand and share it with the world. So that I think our key role with enabling IPD is to be that facilitator for a better world for industry.
Be the conduit. Yeah, sounds good. Final question to all speakers. If you could give one recommendation to clients looking to try IPD for the first time, what exactly would that be? I'll open it up. Pamela, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think I have more of a curiosity than a recommendation. And this is always my curiosity, which is how can we see the counter argument? For example, how can you justify for the procurement team, either through innovative quantity surveying input, how to quantify that you're better to have the investment up front so that you're going to avoid the delays and the cost overruns and the defect rectification later on. So I think there's something in the way we build our programming and our costing where obviously we can't build two projects side by side, but perhaps we could do this digitally as a research case study. But then there has to be a way that we can start to provide cost estimates that quantify high risk situations, cost overruns, with what happens if a proportion of that cost gets put in upfront and then you never experience those delays. So, I know I'm not really saying that very eloquently, but I'm very curious about how we can, use the numbers to help be more persuasive at the beginning of the project. Maybe someone else can help me with that.
Makes total sense to me. Brad, do you want to go next? I'm just going down the line here.
Yeah, my one recommendation would be to start small, but make it a deliberate start. So don't wait for the perfect mega project or the perfect bespoke contract. Pick a real project or a significant package of work and invest a bit more time and budget up front in how you set it up. So bring the architect, the contractor, and one or two of your key trades in early before the lines are drawn and the price is locked in. Co-create a simple project charter that captures your outcomes, your behaviors, and how you're going to deal with risk and change. And choose one digital environment, whether it's Revizto or an equivalent, where everyone commits to working. That becomes your virtual big room and your audit trail. If you do that, you'll get a very quick feel for the benefits and the friction points of IPD 2.0 in your own organization. And you'll be doing it in a way that's scalable. You can take what works, adjust what doesn't, and then apply those lessons learned on larger, more complex projects. So start small, but design that small start to look and feel like the future you want, and the rest will follow.
Fantastic. Sean, do you want to go next?
Kind of building on what Brad has said, outcomes. We've got history, we've got data. Let's look at all of the history and data behind projects that are not delivered under an IPD framework. We've all been involved in projects which have been brilliant, and some of them have been lesser so. Why aren't we introducing new clients to existing clients who've been through projects that weren't delivered under an IPD framework? Why aren't we talking to them about the outcome that they want? And the outcome is not always the end product. It's the journey of getting to the end product. So it's educating clients on the value of IPD, that it's a much simpler pathway to the end rather than battling from start to finish. And I see someone asked a question. Pretty sure you can Google statistics for projects delivered outside of IPD and what poor coordination and the like are worth in terms of cost to help get clients across the line on this. I see the Civil Contractors NZ Survey 2022 says complex contracts, poor coordination, and overruns in the 15 to 20% range. I would think from my experience they sit at least 5 to 10%. So there are tangible bodies of evidence that you can find online that will help strengthen the argument that IPD is the way forward.
Yeah, it seems it's going back to the quote when we keep on doing things the same way, and or a different quote, actually doing the same things the same way and expecting a different result. I think it was Einstein, was it? One of his quotes, I can't remember. Jason will be able to help me out on that.
I think he's attributed with it, but didn't actually say it, is the history of that one, which is quite amusing in itself.
Yeah, I guess just to close it out, Jason, from your perspective, recommendations for clients looking at IPD for the first time, what would it be?
Yeah, no, I'm going to take a slightly different tact from the webinar conversation. I'm going to say the first thing that people should do is read the book or listen to the audio book, How Big Things Get Done. It's a fascinating read on a history of AEC projects. The author behind it has assembled the world's largest database of project insights. And what's fascinating about that is 99 0.5% of projects don't set out to achieve on time, on budget, or the original design brief and performance metrics. So that just blew my mind, that only 0.5% of these projects around the world that have been assessed, and it was over 16,000 projects were assessed, failed to meet those kind of key attributes that we're all striving for. And then layering, after you invest in that, invest in your people, invest in your project team, and then layer technology on top. Technology is an enabler, and it enhances the culture and the underlying support frameworks and the way and cultures and project charters. If those aren't established in the right setting, it'll only enhance a bad outcome. But if you set them in the right order, it'll enhance the right outcome.
Mm. Fantastic. So I know we run out of time, so just like to thank everybody. So to summarize, IPD works because it pulls the right people together, aligns incentives, and gives the team the visibility to solve problems before they become rework. The Lincoln University project clearly shows that better coordination, fewer RFIs, and the calmer path to delivery, which is all great. At the same time, oops, there's another poll which just popped up. At the same time, we're not pretending the barriers aren't real. Contracts, culture, capabilities still get in the way, but there are things that we can do to change project by project to make it more of an industry standard, which I guess is what we're talking about today. So just a reminder, everybody attending will receive the IPD procurement document, which Sean has so eloquently put together. And yeah, we'll run into some Q&A now. We've got not a lot of time left, but let's rip into it. First one, suggestions on how do we get clients to see value instead of cost in such a tight economic environment. Even long view clients like government seem to be penny pinching. Anybody want to put the hand up for that?
Great one for Sean.
Thanks, Jason. Voluntold. Look, I think I touched on it previously. There's data out there that shows the value of IPD. And it's really about trying to make it tangible and measurable for clients. There's a variety of ways you can do that, but it goes back to what I said. You've got to look at historic outcomes for a lot of those clients, particularly governments. They'll have delivered some good projects and some projects that were less than that. So it's spending the time with them to educate them on the value of it. And if you're not sure what the value of it is, more than happy to discuss offline, because that could go on for a long time.
I think I'd just say, add to that, do it early. So don't do it when you're engaged on the project or you've won the project. Have these conversations with clients at the events you go to, or, set up a coffee chat to have your lessons learned brought forward before the procurement is in place.
Thanks for that. Another question on the Lincoln University. Who drove the IPD agenda on the project? Was it requested by the client in the first instance?
The client facilitated and encouraged it. I think there was a broader challenge on the project, which was time. And that led to Brad, his colleague Jono, and myself getting together early to talk about how we could actually deliver the project. If we tried to deliver in a traditional manner, we could never meet any of the gateways in the timeframes we needed to meet. And they were driven by change of government and a few other bits and pieces that needed to be done. So it was set out early, as Brad said, and then we carried it throughout the project.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question here. Continuity in projects is a challenge when design consultants are re-tendered in the early stages. How can this be achieved? Maybe that's a question.
Back to me again, is it?
Yeah.
I think it's consistency of scope is probably the starting point. Are you asking them all to do the same thing, or is it different on every project? there are consistent behaviors you can drive through scope that would allow IPD to transfer from project to project.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so we might wrap up. We've only got 1 minute left. So thanks, team, for those insightful answers and questions. A massive thanks to the panel, Brad, Pamela, Sean, and Jason for sharing your expertise today, and for Danny for helping out with the webinar and getting it off the ground and making it run so smoothly. So thank you, Danny. If there's one takeaway to leave with, I think it's the quote: the most dangerous phase in this language is we've always done it this way. I think it's quite prudent that, just because we've always done it a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way. Today we've seen the breaking that cycle through IPD isn't just theory, it's a blueprint for the future. We saw the Lincoln University Science Hub, the case study, bringing teams together early and leveraging a unified digital environment was the game changer. That is the difference between individuals seeking their own gain and a whole group working together for mutual gain. As we move forward, remember that overcoming the barriers in cultures, contracts, and capabilities starts with transparency and the right tools. Please keep an eye out on your inbox. We'll send the link to the recording and also the IPD procurement checklist. So I'm excited to see that. It's a fantastic document. I also encourage you to download the white paper. If you didn't have a chance to click on the QR code, just reach out to us and we can send you a link. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed it today. And just remember, when it has to be right, it has to be Revizto. So thank you very much, team. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
you.